not being live streamed. It's not being live streamed on any social media platform. So please do feel free to engage and connect. Before we start, we have a song that we would like to play for everyone. If I can just quickly share my screen with everyone and play a good, interesting song for folks.
urupfu nicyo kibi kiruta ibindi urupfu nicyo kibi kiruta ibindi ariko rutubera inzira inzira igana ikiza kiruta ibindi urupfu nicyo kibi kiruta ibindi urupfu nicyo kibi kiruta ibindi ariko rutubera inzira inzira igana ikiza kiruta ibindi.
All right. That is a song. Annika will talk about it some more. Before I hand over to Annika, I just quickly would like to also quickly hand over to Sam to also just welcome everyone and say a few quick words. Over to you, Sam.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. I think it comes at an important moment in time where we see a rise and increase in the use of hate and division in relation to stopping the momentum that we've gained over time in terms of getting to a point where everybody's rights are enjoyed, are respected, but also just growing in a sense of humanity. So I think this is quite an important time for us to be able to have the conversation in relation to what it is that is the driving force in terms of this hate, but also what we can do collectively as a people to be able to reclaim the sense of humanity that is so important to take us over. So thank you for joining us, and I hope we really have a great conversation today.
Thank you very much, Sam. I will now hand over to SALC Executive Director Anneke, who will take us through our discussion. And just do remember, if you have any questions, comments throughout the process, please you can either raise your hand or just post them in the chat box, and we will address them. Later on, we will also have an interactive session just to talk about what kind of advocacy strategies we would be useful in Zim. And this will also be led by our co-conveners, Girls, Street, and ICOS. Over to you, Annika.
Thank you, Bradley. You must have wondered why we have that song in the beginning. And it wasn't because the guy's nice eye candy to watch, but The person who sang the song, Kizito Mahigo, is from Rwanda, and the song is about the genocide in Rwanda. So he had fled Rwanda during the genocide when he was 12 years old. At that point, he wanted to revenge his father's death and become a child soldier, and managed to not become a child soldier, and ended up being a musician, and he studied music. And he was quite popular in Rwanda for some time until he started criticizing the government's response to the genocide, because at some point the government only recognized one side to say it was a genocide committed against the Tutsis, without recognizing that many Hutus had been killed as well. And that is why he wrote the song called The Meaning of Death. He, I think, was upset about the lack of reconciliation, and he was also aware that even all the hatred that there was between groups within Rwanda had long preceded the genocide, and was really the result of the Belgium colonization and the horrors that happened after that. And he was then arrested by the current president of Rwanda and sentenced to, for treason as a result of this song. And at some point, he was pardoned after public discontent because he was in prison. When he came out, he was told that he would have to be nice to the president and only say nice things. So he tried to flee the border. When the country, when he got to the border with Burundi, he was arrested, and he died within a police cell. So he died in February 2020. Very few people know this song, but while he was in prison, he ended up being in prison next to people who had in fact killed his family members. And he learned their side of the story as well. So in prison, they called him the Dove. So why am I saying all of this? It starts with hate speech. In Rwanda, it started a long time ago with issues festering between different groups until it escalated to people being dehumanized and being called cockroaches and those sort of things. And we all know that hate can lead to violence and it can lead to genocide. Yet we're not doing as a society a lot about hate. And we can now see that globally hate is escalating, hate is tolerated on social media, hate has been normalized. And the question is, what do we do about it? So this webinar is specifically about hate. How do we deal with hate? How do we try to counter it? How do we realize that no one is born to be hateful? People become hateful, and what is it that makes them become hateful, and how do we counter that? And the key thing is and this is why it might be useful to have a webinar like this to a broader group in Zimbabwe, because it's not one group's issue. It's our entire society's issue. And hate is also intersecting across various different groups in many different ways. And what we need to start is a conversation that says that we're not tolerant of any form of hate. And a lot of hate comes from misunderstandings. It comes from ignorance. It comes from an ignorance breed fear. So a big problem with, if we want to address hate, and this is what Kizito Mahigo sings about as well, if we want to address hate, we also need to address ignorance of each other. We need to tell human stories that makes everyone see that we're actually all the same, and we're all humans, and we all want to live in a society that is peaceful and accepting and makes everyone prosper. So I'm gonna try and be positive despite the sad song. We'll play the sad song for you again at the end, just so that you can hear the whole thing. And I'll try and go through a few things. So my task is just to set out the legal framework, and we can speak more afterwards about strategies one can do to actually address hate more broadly. So people often confuse hate speech and freedom of speech. So we know that freedom of speech is protected, and people then say, well, that means I also have the right to express hate. But we know that if that is allowed, then things can escalate very quickly towards violence and towards genocides of groups of people. So we can't actually allow that conversation to continue where people say that there's a thin line between free speech and hate speech. I don't think there's a thin line at all. I think it's two different things. And luckily for us, Zimbabwe's constitution agrees with that. I'll just speak a bit about hate speech itself. So there's not a specific definition of what hate speech is. Under international human rights law, it's limited to speech that incites discrimination, hostility, or violence. The UN defines hate speech a bit more broadly as any type of communication that attacks or use pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a group or person based on their identity. And we'll send the slides to people in the chat later on. So when we speak about hate speech, we're not talking about stuff that's expressed towards government. We're talking about speech expressed against individuals or groups of individuals. So hate speech as basically it can be any type of expression. So even the swastika, for example, would be an example of hate speech because of what people know it embodies. So you don't necessarily need to say things in words, and every community might have different forms of hate speech that we are aware of. So hate speech is basically discriminatory, intolerant, prejudiced, and contemptuous speech about an individual or a group. And normally that individual group is defined based on one of their identity factors, and this could be religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, or gender, but also any other characteristics. So it can really be any identity characteristics, disability, health, sexual orientation, and one can't actually have a list because we don't know what future characteristics there are going to be that is used to target people. In some countries, there's hate towards children who live on the streets. And people actually, we've had cases where people express intense hate and incitement to violence against children living on the streets. There could be sex workers that experience it. And that has in fact happened in Zimbabwe. So we all know there's many different forms of it. Here we come to Zimbabwe. The Constitution has certain founding values. So I know there's a reality and then there's the ideal. Let's look at what's on the law books, and then let's look at how we can use what's on the law books to advocate for a better reality. So in the founding values in the Constitution, it says that it recognizes diversity, it recognizes dignity, equality, and these are all important things to show that everything in the Constitution has to be interpreted in line with these sort of founding values. It also says that every state and every person must promote national unity, peace, and stability. So just to say, if you see on the left-hand corner a number, that's the section. So this is section 10, and at the bottom is the law. So this is section 10 of the Constitution. So actually, it's imperative for all of us in Zimbabwe to promote national unity, peace, and stability. And we know that if there's hate speech, you're not going to get peace and stability and unity. Which takes us to, yes, Zimbabwe has the right to freedom of expression and freedom of the media, but Zimbabwe explicitly excludes incitement to violence, advocacy of hatred, and hate speech from the right to freedom of expression, which means there is no thin line between freedom of expression and hate speech. Hate speech is entirely not linked to freedom of expression in Zimbabwe. In fact, this is the best constitution in the entire region and the only one that specifically excludes hate speech from the right to freedom of expression. So on that note, we can end the webinar and we'll just plan strategies to deal with this, but I've got a few other things to say. So I'll go quickly through some of this. One thing that worries people always is parliamentarians. They can be very dodgy people and say horrible things. What they say in Parliament is protected under the Privilege, Immunities and Powers of Parliament Act, but there might be other ways of dealing with them when they're outside of Parliament, and this is where we'll, so just keep this in mind. So sometimes people confuse hate speech and discrimination. So if I tell you you can't play in the soccer team because you're a woman, that is discrimination. And there's stuff one can do to deal with that discrimination. If I, however, go about and say publicly that no woman should ever play in a soccer team because they are sissies who ought to be condemned and are just useless to our society, then it becomes hate speech, because then I'm encouraging hatred towards a specific group. So it's more than just being discriminatory or rude to one individual. It is about trying to get society to not respect an entire group of people based on their specific identity factor. So there was an example, a case in South Africa, the Kwelani case, where a journalist had spoken about gays in a newspaper article, and the Constitutional Court found against him on that, and that's where this quote comes from. I'll deal with a few things. The main thing is to say we cannot allow hate to be normalized. And we have done this. If you, for example, see people say bad things about Ndebele or Shona, do you speak up? If they say bad things about people with psychosocial or intellectual disabilities, do you speak up? We cannot just speak up for our own issues and not for all other expressions of hate. And we need to build bridges across all sectors, because actually no one wants hate in our society. And that could be a very good unifying factor also to build alliances and campaigns around issues. So if you want to deal with hate speech, there are offenses that can be used that people can be charged with. And there's also you could also go to court. So I'll quickly deal with that. So you could sue someone for civil defamation. And as part of suing them, you can try to get an interdict to stop them from continuing to say hateful things against you and others in your group. There has been a case where people have tried to go to court to get that sort of interdict, but they didn't bring enough evidence to be successful. So obviously you need to show that those statements were made. You can't just say, I heard things were said about me. You need to have heard it yourself, or at least seen it or published or whatever else. Just to note, going to court can be difficult because you need a lawyer. It's a protracted process, can be costly. You might get some of your costs back if you win, but there's so many other costs involved, like missing out on work or all those sort of things. So it's not always ideal. Sometimes the start could be to just go to a lawyer or go to Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights or the Zim NGO Forum, ask them to write a letter to the person who is expressing hate. A legal letter to say, dear sir or madam, we note you have been engaging in hateful behavior towards XYZ group. This is contrary to the law in Zimbabwe. Kindly refrain from doing so, failing which we will exercise all the legal options available to us. Threats work, is all I'm saying, sometimes. Doesn't always, sometimes it could escalate things. But if it's like, yeah, I mean, people also want to fit in a community and no one wants to go to court. So you'd have to assess who is doing it and how one can actually address it. I won't go into all the issues around defamation. Let's look at the Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act. This is basically the penal code of Zimbabwe. There's a number of offenses people can be charged with under the criminal code. The one is public violence. So it says any person who alone or with other people disturbs the peace or invades the right of other people, intending that this would lead to a disturbance or invasion, constitutes it will be guilty of public violence. So in some cases, the way in which hate speech is expressed can actually constitute the offense of public violence. Then there's the offense of participating in a gathering with the intent to promote public violence, breaches of the peace, or bigotry. Again, this could be something that, and it's not very specific. It says, if you look at number C, for one, for example, if it is with the intention to engender, promote, or expose to hatred, contempt, or ridicule, any group, section, or class of persons solely on account of the race, tribe, nationality, place of origin, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, or gender of such group. So, okay, it doesn't include everything, every possible identity factor, but some of those identity factors could be extended, or one can ask the court to read in other identity factors. Previously, for example, when there used to be discrimination against people based on their HIV status, courts throughout the region have looked at these type of provisions which are limited only to specific groups, and the courts have read in HIV status. So there is precedent for including other groups, but to do so, one would have had to train the courts and one would have had to do quite some work in the legal arguments presented. But gender, for example, can be pretty widely interpreted if one wanted to go that far. Anyway, worth trying this section. Then there's just in relation to this section, it says, yeah, there's just some particularly in terms of how it is enforced. And where it says at the end that sometimes you might not use this section to charge someone, but you might rather want to charge a person with disorderly conduct in a public place or causing offense to persons based on a particular race, tribe, color, creed, or religion. So there is alternative offenses if that a person can also be charged with. So going on that, there's the offense of disorderly conduct in public. If you intentionally use threatening or abusive words, insulting language, intending to provoke a breach of the peace, realizing that this could in fact be a possibility. Now, if you saying stuff inciting people to start acting against any group in society, that would be a breach of the peace. So that's the intention of this section, to try and stop those sort of scenarios. Then there's the offense also, like I mentioned, of causing offense to persons of a particular race or religion. This is a bit narrowly defined. But still, it is useful when we work across sectors to also expose other forms of hate, and there one can then use this section to do so. There's the offense of intimidation, which might or might not be useful. There's the offense of criminal nuisance. So the criminal nuisance offense is not very clear if you look at the actual offense, but the offense is defined in a schedule attached to the criminal code. And one of the categories is if someone shouts or screams in a public place to the annoyance of the public. So then you could charge. So if someone starts screaming hateful stuff and everyone's like, then that could be a basis on which to charge that person with criminal nuisance. Or if the person has anything else that causes discomfort or inconvenience to the public or any section of the public. So I'm going through this very quickly, but you'll get the slides. There's the offense of criminal insult, which if a person by words or conduct impair the dignity or the privacy of another person. And here the court will look at various factors, including the words that were or conduct, whether they were repeated, the degree of offense caused to the person whose dignity was impaired. And then look right at the end, which is the most beautiful section, number 7. For the avoidance of doubt, it is declared that no person in Zimbabwe is devoid of dignity, whatever his or her occupation or mode of life, and that the dignity of all persons is entitled to the protection of the law. At this point, I assume you're all crying, right? So it's so beautiful. So let's just keep this in mind, section 95(7). Very powerful. Because they wrote this in because they anticipated, say, for example, I'm a sex worker. I go to the court, I lay a charge of criminal insult. I said someone treated me in a way that impaired my dignity. And the police says, we're not going to take you seriously, you're a sex worker. But section 7 says, you have to take it seriously, no matter what my mode of life or occupation is, and all persons are entitled to dignity and protection of the law. So Zimbabwe is the only country which actually puts in that sort of extra strength to the provision at the end of it. Then, in the criminal code, there is also other computer-related offenses. This criminal code is huge, is all I'm saying. And I'll go through each of those. So now we're talking about computer, electronic, cell phone, those type of things. So there's an offense of transmission of data, of a data message inciting violence or damage to property. If I send a WhatsApp message on a group saying, let's go for those people, they're all horrible, that would constitute an offense under this section. Then there's the offense of sending a threatening data message. Same thing, really similar to before, where you threaten to harm a person or the person's family through any computer or information system. Interesting here is number 2. Any person who upskirts or records nude images or videos of a citizen or a foreigner who is a resident without consent shall be guilty of an offense. Now, this isn't really to do with hate speech, but I just kept it in because I think there might be many other instances in which you want to actually go to the police and complain of a violation of this section. And look, the imprisonment can be for up to 5 years. There's the offense of cyberbullying and harassment. At this point, you must all be thinking I'm talking of a different country. And perhaps I got it wrong and was reading the laws of Seychelles or something, but this is actually Zimbabwe. So the offense of cyberbullying and harassment, if you're using any electronic media with the intent to coerce, intimidate, harass, threaten, bully, or cause substantial emotional distress, or to degrade, humiliate, or demean the person of, or encourage a person to harm him or herself, that is an offense of cyberbullying and harassment. Then there's the offense of transmission of a false data message intending to cause harm. So if, for example, I send out on social media a message that says, all Mozambicans are criminals, that is a false message intended to cause harm. But we know there's all those messages out there all the time. I mean, people send messages like that in South Africa saying be careful of Zimbabweans. So, but we don't have as nice a law as you guys have. But one should really charge people for these sort of things. And we should charge it if you come across a case that's got nothing to do with, like, that's not linked to issues that you're working with, but it's something that promotes hate. We need to act on it. We need to show that hate is not tolerated in our society. Then there's the offense of transmission of intimate images without consent. And it defines the intimate image as a visual depiction of a person made by any means in which the person is nude, blah, blah, blah. So worth looking into. Then there's the offense of production and dissemination of racist and xenophobic material. And yeah, the person can be sentenced up to 10 years imprisonment. So again, useful to know. And you can just see when you look at all these offenses, I'm sure you're thinking, but I've seen all of this said on social media. Why are people not charged? And what one can start doing is actually replying to a message like that and say, you should stop, or I will lay a criminal charge of production and dissemination of racist and xenophobic material in terms of Section 164F of the Criminal Code with the police. Let's just start calling this out wherever we see it. Finally, there's what's called identity-related offenses. It's if a person intentionally, by means of information or other communication, sends data or posts any material with the intent to coerce, intimidate, harass, threaten, or bully, or cause harm to someone. Yeah, it's very similar to that other offense. Anyway, all of these can be used. Then just more broadly, under the law, there's what you call incitement. So anyone who incites someone else to commit any of the offenses that I've mentioned above, that in itself is an offense. So yeah, if you incite someone to commit violence, realizing that that person might actually go ahead as a result of your incitement, that is the offense of incitement to commit a crime. Noted, though, that the criminal code specifically says it won't prosecute trivial crimes. So if it's something small and it's something more said in a jokey manner and it wasn't said to many people, the police might decide not to go ahead with it. But if the police is just not taking it seriously because who's laying the complaint, that's a different issue, and they one should take it up with someone higher up at the police or lay a complaint to the police complaints body. Then you have the Prevention of Discrimination Act, which makes it an offense to make or communicate racial statements. Now, in addition to all the hate speech-related offenses I mentioned above, people might also be committing hate crimes. So hate crimes is if you injure another person because of your sort of hostility towards that person. So there should really be an aggravated sentence for people who commit crimes and are motivated with hatred against any group when they do that. And there is some good case law, not from Zimbabwe, from elsewhere, on how that is done. Zimbabwe's law does, however, sort of anticipate some of this. So, for example, in the crime of murder, which is in the criminal code, the section 47.4 states that for the avoidance of doubt, it is declared that the circumstances seen as being aggravating are not exhaustive, and that a court may find other circumstances in which a murder is committed to be aggravating. So if there is a hate crime where someone is killed because they're lesbian, for example, that person should get a worse sentence than what they would ordinarily have gotten. And the law allows for that. And all we need to do is ensure that prosecutors are trained to ask for that aggravated sentence. Now, to get us back to the song we played in the beginning, it's not going to help if we throw everyone in jail who says something hateful. For example, youth often say hateful things because that's what their parents taught them, or their peers, or they think it's cool, or something like that. But these youth, you can't just send them to prison because they're going to end up coming out worse after prison. What you need to do is try and change them. And change is possible. So the court can can order people either in addition to a sentence or instead of it to community service. The court can order them to keep the peace and be of good behavior. The court can also order people to pay compensation for damage or for personal injury. And the importance is that we need our courts to make these orders. We need our courts to show that hate speech and hate crimes are serious, and they must really set the example and say that it will not be tolerated. Because if we do tolerate it, things will escalate, no doubt, especially in the global environment that we are in. And the courts can do that also, apart from having a broad discretion under the Criminal Procedure and Evidence Code. They can do it also through sentencing guidelines or through laws, or just exercising their discretion. And I think the reason why this is so important is because we have normalized hate speech. And not only has that happened, but globally now, the right wing are saying that hate speech is part of the right to freedom of expression, and that if we don't allow them to express hate, we're actually violating their rights. So they're making themselves the victims, as opposed to the victims being the people against whom they're expressing hate. And there was one good case, as an example, that occurred in the UK Court of Appeal last week, where a woman actually put on Facebook that she thinks people must just burn down the hostels where refugees are staying in the UK. And when she was charged under the Public Order Act with incitement, and when she was charged, everyone was in uproar and said, all the conservative people said, this is terrible, now this woman's freedom of speech is being abused. And the Court of Appeal said, well, actually, no. She knew exactly that she was inciting violence. She knew that her statement had the potential to cause harm to people. She had made similar statements before, and the court sentenced her to 3 years imprisonment. And that would be an example where you see where the courts are actually taking hate speech seriously. And I think that's where I want to end off, and that's why we played the song today. Where we are at is we are where we were at 100 years ago, where persecution of people based on their sexual orientation or their religion was the norm. And we are back at that. And it's getting worse. And I think the beauty we have in Zimbabwe is that we have good laws. And there's lots of hate. I mean, Zimbabwe comes with having the Hukurandi massacres and so many other things that have happened that is still very traumatizing for people, but people would also appreciate, I think, that we don't want that to happen again. And there must be ways in which we can all think about strategies we could get to work across sectors to try and deal with hate so that it doesn't happen again. And just lastly, it is possible to have a law specifically prohibiting hate speech. It's not actually necessary because of all the good offenses that Zimbabwe does have. Just note that there is some other useful sections also. So I know hate speech often escalates during elections, and the Electoral Code of Conduct specifically says that politicians and their members and supporters may not use hateful language, and you can actually lodge complaints against them if they do so. And then at the same time, the Broadcasting Services Act requires that all broadcasting services develop their own codes of conduct, and those conducts have to specifically deal with, ensure that no programs use offensive language that includes hate speech. Or that incites or perpetrates or perpetuate hatred against any specific group. And here the definition is much broader, you see, under E than what it is in any of the other parts, where they include mental disability, age, gender. I think obviously gender we want to interpret quite widely. Yeah, so I'm just putting that all there, that there are various ways in which in society we can try and deal with hate and stand together against it. Thank you.
There I am. Thank you, Annika. Very informative. And just to remind everyone, we will share Annika's presentation with everyone. And after this webinar, we will also just send out a questionnaire based on the presentations, discussions, sort of like a mini little quiz. Very easy though. And then after that, if you complete it, you'll get like a certificate, which is very great. So you can also just leave your emails in the chat box if you're keen to take part. Before I hand over to Sam and Tanatsu to lead us on the discussion around strategies, what we can do as communities, as CSOs, what can work, what cannot work. I'm just looking through the chat box. Okay, we have like a few comments and questions. I can quickly read them out. So Wilson says, hate speech among key and vulnerable populations have been institutionalized in Zimbabwe. The judiciary is now captured. What strategies can be used to ensure that key and vulnerable populations are safe? Okay, so you responded to that, Anike. Um, Okay. Lenmore says some of these laws are not enforced once you report. Let's say a defamation case, you are asked to go and bring a person in without any escort. How do you deal with cases like that?
Do you want me to answer, Brad?
Yeah, I was going to read them all, but sure.
Oh, okay. Now let me just quickly deal with that one. I
Yeah.
think that obviously it's hard, and I know Sam can speak much more about how you engage police stations. What you really need to do is in your community, map the services in your community that are available to try and deal with these issues. So there might be a police station, there might be magistrates court, there might be human rights commission, there might be like different organizations. And then you can think, okay, what's our key problems with the police station? Who at the police station are our key problems? Is it the victim support center? Is it the charge office? Is it the station commissioner himself or herself? And then try and set up a meeting with them and actually talk through the common problems your community has at the police station, especially with cases not being opened when there are serious and real cases. And you point to the fact that the criminal code actually says people's cases must be taken. And then if the problem actually lies with the station commissioner, then you have to go above that person, whether it's at a regional level to the police or one I could even go to the Human Rights Commission. But there's various levels, and I think we can have a separate webinar on just mapping out how one would identify the various levels and then how one would try and create allies at some of these levels and say, okay, it's not, I don't have an ally here, but I do have an ally there, so let me go there. And then figuring out those sort of things. Relationships are key, but to be honest, we can't not enforce the laws. So we have to push for the laws to be enforced. If all else fail, go to the media and say that the police station is ignoring all of the laws that are in the criminal code. Identify which police officers are the ones that refuse to take up cases so that one can actually lay complaints of misconduct also against them.
Okay. I guess that also helps with the question, how do you deal with with a situation with a police who is with a person who is inciting is a police officer or a politician?
Same thing. So definitely you can go to the political party, um, because the political party should not be fostering hate speech, and you can lay a complaint against the politician at the party. You can still take the politician to the police station and lay a charge. And if you know it's not going to be taken seriously, take it to a district in which the politician is not, where it's not their district, like where their party is perhaps not in charge. Take the media with you. So that, or afterwards go to the media and say, we all try, and have different groups try and open a criminal case against that same politician, and then publish that in the media. And yes, with the police officer, you can't go to that police officer's police station to lay a complaint, but you can go to any other police station to lay a complaint, document your complaint, and you might want to, if it's a police officer, go a bit higher up than just your normal police stations.
Got it. Got it. All right. I think this is the time where we engage more. So if you do want to say something, please just raise your hand. Now I'll hand over to Sam and Tanat. So unfortunately, Guda's not here. Tanat was roping you in to just, yeah, talk about your organizations and how you're dealing with hate crimes, and what strategies could work in Zim. Not sure who will take it first between girls or treat.
Okay, so I can go first. I see there are a lot of concerns that have been raised in relation to particularly dealing with the police. But I think there's something important that Annika also mentioned, which is around creating relationships with these different spaces that we need to constantly seek for these cases to be dealt with. So I think for us particularly, the point at which we engaged with the police was particularly around the COVID period, because there was an escalated vulnerability for trans and gender diverse persons at that point in time. So it is quite a process to be able to engage them at a larger audience, but it does start with the first step of engaging. The problem is we often engage in a somewhat hostile manner when already there is an issue happening, and at that point in time we need that issue dealt with, which takes us away from creating long-term relations that can help us deal with problem areas where people are facing issues or facing a lot of hate-related crimes. So we were fortunate enough to be able to engage Rose Camp, which has some sort of a jurisdiction over different areas, and be able to especially speak to, if you cannot speak to that particular area station, they are main centers, and take it from a friendly perspective, just in terms of the problems that a particular group is facing. Make sure that you really highlight the kind of vulnerability that they're facing. Um, and that it did actually help for us to have conversations with the police about cases they have faced of meeting groups of people that belong to the group that we actually work with, our beneficiaries. and them telling you about their experiences, the challenges that they face, or from their point of view, what they view as problematic with dealing with such cases. It does help to have a better a sort of way of engagement whenever new cases do occur. And I think also SRC as well has created relations through their paralegal networks as well, to be able to raise issues, not only when situations happen, but to be able to request that they have a much more positive perspective to cases of, it's like putting human face to the people that they will deal with and the issues that they will face. So that does help, particularly engaging with the police, being able to create those relations in advance and have that conversation. One thing about Azim society, there is a very kind of parental. It's I think it's across African nations, a very parental sort of perspective that people have even before they are officers of the law or before they are part of the judiciary. So trying to appeal to that nature also does assist in terms of highlighting the impact of the hate speech, or the impact of the violence that is faced, being able to really show how people are unable to navigate public life uh, based on those experiences. It does help. The problem is often when we go to spaces as institutions, we also approach them as if from an authoritative perspective, as if you are there to correct them in a sense, in a way that actually should be happening at law. Whereas we are supposed to be a bridge that just fosters the understanding of what's happening on the ground, to request that change before we actually get to a point of taking up those cases. So for us, that has helped maintaining those relationships in terms of how then we get justice where we can, or a better treatment. Personally, myself, I've also in a situation where I've had to be taken into a police station, been met with a better reception because of the work that was done with the Central Police before the incident, in case where I had to be attended to there. So creating those relations does go a long way.
Thank you, Sam. Tanatwa?
Mic testing, am I audible?
Slightly low, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. And also to you, Chair by extension, thank you for hosting this space. So just to speak a little bit about the work that GAUS is doing to curb hate crimes and hate speech, some of the issues, I think it's a duplication of work. It also speaks to some of the work that Sam has also highlighted. So we are also doing some of the work that Sam has already alluded to, but maybe just to buttress on or extend how we are also combating hate crimes and hate speech. So the first thing is when GAUS was established in 1990, the first role that GAUS took was to create a community space, which was a safe space. This was particularly useful because of the draconian laws, whereby then there was not very much effective legal strategies that we could use, especially that the law was bent against LGBTI. So what we could do and what we can continue to do now is to strengthen community spaces, which are safe spaces for community to come together and share different experiences, their lived realities. So that's one of the first strategies. And then another one is obviously engagement with journalists as well as media practitioners. Much of the work that we've been doing, we've been engaging mostly media practitioners. Last year, we had a training with an amalgamation of radio communities in Zimbabwe, as well as both state and private media houses as well, because the media plays a very crucial role in shaping narratives. So the training mainly were to try and indulge journalists and probe them to promote sensitive and responsible journalism. Especially in Zimbabwe, we have a crisis whereby a lot of LGBTI narratives are pushed through a sensational lens. So that was one of the main crucial engagement, main key elements that we approached when we were engaging with journalists and media practitioners. And then apart from that, COWS also has a very effective rapid response to hate speech. This includes we have press statements that we push out, that we develop in house, as well as very effective media engagement. We also have an in-house lawyer who also keeps a good rapport and collaborates with the Zimbabwe Lawyers for Human Rights as part of the rapid response to hate speech and hate crimes. Also, one of the most effective tools that I haven't heard talked about a lot was leveraging on high-profile incidents or controversies in order to raise awareness for rights through the media. For instance, I'll give you an example. Last year, we had two cases in Zimbabwe. We had one which included the vandalism of girls' resource centers in Harare and Masvingo, and there were a lot of conversations around that. And then the second one was the United Methodist Church legalizing same-sex marriages as well as LGBTI clergy. So those were the two high-profile incidences from last year. So what we realized is that we can leverage on those incidences and controversies. Apart from that, sorry, I just left another one, which was we put out a call calling for LGBTI students to apply for a scholarship called the Munu Munu Scholarship. And in response to that, we got attraction from the state, whereby the vice president of the country, President Chiwenga, issued out a very worded press statement against girls. So that was also one of the high-profile cases. So then, what we do is we leverage those incidences where a lot of conversations are going on and about LGBTI, and then we use them to counter misinformation as well as ill narratives about LGBTI. So yeah, that's one of the key strategies that I was really excited to talk about. Let's see. Another one is also public education. This is whereby one of GAUS's main mandate is to promote access to health for LGBTI. So uh, key engagement also includes building a good rapport with healthcare service providers. So what GAUS has been doing throughout the years is also sensitizing public service health providers, which is Wilkins Hospital, Harare City Hospital, even amongst other satellite clinics and facilities across the country, as well as also reaching out to cultural and opinion leaders who also play a very significant role in shaping narratives, especially in rural and peri-urban areas. I think that's pretty much, but yeah, that's a little bit about some of the work that GAUS is doing to combat hate speech and hate crimes. Over to you, Bradley.
That is quite a lot. I think something we should probably think about is maybe doing like a regional webinar around strategies, and then girls can help in leading this. Right, something to think about. Thank you. Just to check also, if do we have anyone from Zetal HR or the Human Rights Commission in the room? I mean, if not, we can all, if there's anyone who would like to share something, say something, pose a question, now's the time. Yes, Sam.
Okay, just quickly, when Annika was going through her presentation, it just got me thinking about a lot of what was presented in the media right at the beginning of the year after the situation with Trump, where a lot of misinformation was put out there in relation to um, LGBT communities and funding, and particularly a video that circulated of one local person who claimed that LGBT communities were getting paid $20 an hour for being gay, all that kind of information that is put out there, because there seems to be a trend, a growing trend, and it's gotten me thinking around some of the ways in which we can seek recourse and have not necessarily combated those situations, how it can easily escalate into um, the spreading of a hate agenda just by people believing those untruths as they are put out there. So it got me thinking about how we can actually collectively come together and start mapping out some of these incidents and actually trying to take action in that regard as a way of combating hate. So a lot has been happening, but I don't think we've really been mapping and responding um, as much as we actually could to those incidents as they happen.
Yeah. So I guess that's also one thing that we should probably strengthen our documentation, and how do we deal with the incidences in a very strategic manner, right? And I think really do think that the follow up engagement would be very useful. Um, Anyone else who is burning for a comment or a question? Um,
Hi, Bradley.
Hi, Anesu.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add on to what Sam was talking about, particularly on the issue of strengthening relationships with the police, considering how they are quite important in the work that we do as the LGBTI community. Because whenever you bring a case, like Lenmore, I think, was alluding to, at times it might not be taken seriously. But when you've got those relationships with them, yes, we know that's not how things are supposed to go. But with the climate that is within the country, the political and social climate, it is very important to then have those people on your side. And those issues can actually be actioned well. And the victims of those particular attacks or hate crimes can actually get recourse expeditiously. So that would then be advice to every other organization represented here to continue strengthening those relationships. And if they don't have particular relations with the police, to actually start cultivating them so that in the near future they'll be able to continue working with the police for the benefit of the communities that they serve. Yeah, that's my contribution.
Thank you. Thank you. Uh, okay, I didn't see anything in the chat box. Yeah. Um, just to note, we will share for those that joined in as we were engaging. We will share out a questionnaire, small easy quiz, and if you complete it, we will issue out a certificate for you. So do let us know if you're interested in that. We will also share all the presentations and resources um, before the end of this week with everyone, and that may be useful also. Um, yeah, I think we're pretty good on time. So, in the absence of questions, comments, I will, like, on behalf of SALC, just thank everyone for participating and engaging with us, and hand over to our co-host, Gals and Treat, to sign us out. Oh, we'll play the song as people depart.
Yeah, so thank you to everyone for attending the webinar. I think it's really given us a lot to think about in terms of the various sections that often probably we've looked at as things we'd normally look at them from the lens of things we can be charged with ourselves, but actually thinking about um, having a strategy in terms of using those different sections to be able to get a better grip on our current situation and be able to start combating hate more effectively. So thank you for joining, and we're looking forward to engaging with many more of you in terms of what we can actually strategically do together moving forward.
Thank you, Sam. Gals, are we good?
Okay, thank you, Bradley. Yeah, as Sam has rightfully put, I'd just like to thank everyone who has taken time to engage in these important conversations. Thank you for your insights, your commitment. We know that you are busy, and so thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your passion. Guys, it's truly appreciated. So maybe going forward, I really hope that these conversations don't just end with the webinar, but even beyond that, let's continue to engage, share ideas, strengthen our partnerships, as well as to keep documenting. Even yeah, there's a lot of value in documenting cases of hate speech, cases of hate crimes, which can be used for evidence in our advocacy. So yeah, so let's keep engaging, let's keep encouraging each other. Thank you so much. Over to you, Bradley.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
urupfu ni wo muryango ugana imana nyir'ubuzima ariko kugira ngo uwo muryango ukinguke hagomba ijwi ry'imana mu kinyarwanda gupfa ni ukwitaba imana mu kinyarwanda gupfa ni ukwitaba imana mu kinyarwanda gupfa ni ukwitaba imana urupfu ibindi urupfu nicyo kibi kiruta ibindi ariko rutubera inzira igana ikiza kiruta ibindi nta rupfu rwiza rubaho yaba jenoside cyangwa intambara uwishwe n'abihorera uwazize impanuka cyangwa se uwazize indwara